Hey everyone, I want to talk all about why maybe not doesn't have the applicability when it comes to chronic OCD and anxiety recovery like we think, the mistakes I made with maybe not, why a lot of people use it to push away intrusive thoughts in the moment, and also use it as a short-term self-reassurance disputing method when it's really actually quite different than unconditional acceptance. The mistakes I made and how I kind of changed that and what I recommend to people in my coaching, and going from there. So I've been doing a couple of videos in my car lately. I've just been on the road a lot. And in between what I do for my work, I have time in between. So sometimes it just works really well because I had an appointment get canceled to throw the camera on a little bit and just talk to you guys about kind of the misconceptions and the mistakes I made surrounding maybe not. So before I go any further, please subscribe, hit that like button, comment down below. Let me know what you think about maybe not. Let me think if you think it has a lot more application than maybe I think, and then we can just kind of go through some things. I always tell people we like an open dialogue in the comment section. I go through and ask a bunch of questions to different people. And if you're interested in our coaching and webinar services, please email us at info@ocdrecovery.com and we will get back to you in a timely fashion. So when you look at the mainstream way how maybe not is used, it is surface level. So you think about, you have an onion, and inside the onion, we'll do an apple, and at the core of the apple is the engine of OCD, which is the fear. I always like to say the engine is the fear or the irrational belief, and then the gasoline is the compulsive behaviors and avoidance behaviors. But if the car is in neutral and it's rolling down a hill, it could still roll without any gasoline in it if you have a stick shift, because the OCD cycle doesn't really turn off unless you kind of get underneath it with unconditional self-life and other acceptance to a large degree. So when are people using maybe not, besides in a superficial manner? Let's say you have any fear. And I'm not going to talk about why it doesn't work for really latched chronic fears in the way we think it does, why it won't touch real event false memory OCD, and why people use it as a compulsive behavior. But let's say you have a fear of dying, and you're getting intrusive thoughts surrounding dying. And you say, maybe not, and you're saying that all day long. Well, there's no actual philosophical depth to that. And it's understandable why we do that, because so many people think that OCD is a lot easier to get better from than we think. It's why most people who think they're recovered usually aren't recovered. Why most people who say they've made a lot of progress haven't made as much progress as they think, especially when they kind of come into us. I'm not saying, in that regard, I'm just giving an example. A lot of people come in that say, in other words, hey, I'm recovered, but these are the things I want to go over. Well, if you were recovered, you wouldn't want to come in usually. So it's very obvious that most people aren't recovered, because recovery takes usually for most people many years. And I don't mean many years as in like 6, 7, 8, 9, but 2, 3, 4 years, 5 years to get really a lot better. You're not going to be chronically suffering during that whole entire time, but you'll probably have some really big relapses and setbacks, and that's important to understand that. So if you're responding in the moment with maybe not, you're more than likely using it as a self-reassuring statement where it's actually becoming a problem. And when you go on social media and you type in the OCD in a hashtag, and you look at all the stuff that says respond to thoughts with maybe not, the content of the thought doesn't matter, you can tell right away that there's not really an understanding of OCD, because OCD takes orders from beliefs. It doesn't take orders from thoughts. And anyone who really has a good grasp on OCD understands that. So there's usually that core fear present, and then that core fear will perpetuate intrusive thoughts, images, sensation, urges, and that is what people get so scared of, and particularly intrusive thoughts with this one, particular intrusive thoughts. And that's when people are responding with that maybe not. And it's a mistake. It's a common mistake. Now, does maybe not give you some distance between the suffering? It does. It has benefit in that regard, but it's a very minuscule tool. It's a very small tool in the large toolbox that me, Moment, and Sam talked about in our recent Real Talks video, talking about all the things that go into OCD and anxiety recovery. Unconditional self-life, other acceptance, bringing down compulsions and avoidance behaviors, lifestyle factors, everything else involved, not forcing acceptance. And a very small piece of that would be using the maybe, maybe not in the way that most people are using it. But again, when you go on the accounts and you see it, they make OCD out to just be something you could just disregard. But anyone who has chronic OCD knows that the sensations and the suffering are with you 24/7, morphing, changing, different physical symptoms of anxiety, blurry vision, heart palpitations, panic attacks, chronic shame, chronic guilt. And the OCD sufferer tends to know the disorder better than anyone because they're the ones suffering it. They're the ones living with it. So when you're telling us stuff that we think, hey, that sounds really superficial, it's usually because of this. Now, let's talk about the other aspect of where maybe, maybe not doesn't really have much applicability, if any applicability. And that is for a false memory in a real event. So false memory in real event will feel as if the person needs to spend all of their time going into the past, digging up a scenario, looking for that perfect piece of information. Was it on this day? Was it that day? What was I wearing? Was it the night? Did the person have consent? Anything you could imagine. So the big mistake is, maybe you meet someone and you're working with them and then they're having you spend a lot of time in the past. That's what a lot of people do. But then what happens is, all that time that you're spending in the past is a very minuscule piece that's necessary to get underneath your fears, which is with unconditional self-life, other acceptance in the now, in the moment, in the now. All we have to do when we look at the past and where maybe, maybe not can have some applicability is literally, maybe it happened, maybe it didn't. Not trying to say, was it a real event, was it a false memory? So in that applicability, maybe, maybe not, and then working on the belief you hold now, which is, if that actually happened, I would not be able to accept myself. I'm a terrible person. I never deserve to be let off the hook. I can't stand not knowing whether that happened or not. But I rarely meet anyone who's reached long-term robust recovery. And a sidestep real quick, because I've been getting this a lot lately. I see a lot of posts where people say, you have frequent relapses and setbacks in recovery. No, you do not. When you have a very good unconditional self-life, other acceptance on a particular fear, like I do with my sensory motor OCD, there's no certainty. But it's very, very rare if it happens. And if it happens, it lasts for a few minutes. It's not what we think. It's not this perpetuating relapse, setback. And if you're not there yet, you're not at OCD recovery, it's not the end of the world. It's not terrible. And there are many people who have made tremendous progress. Then they beat themselves up because they say they've never met OCD, they haven't reached OCD recovery. But reaching robust levels of no chronic shame and chronic guilt, whilst very hard, it is doable, but it is important to realize that I don't meet many people, if anyone, who has really had severe OCD and came out the other side with using maybe, maybe not. And the unfortunate side is a lot of the people using the maybe, maybe not unfortunately, have never had OCD themselves. A lot of people who say they have OCD and overcome it, they haven't had chronic OCD like many of us have, because the applications of what they use, you have to work on recovery all day long. It's all about OCD. Track every compulsion, track every this. That would not work for a chronic OCD sufferer. And we know that because we work with thousands and thousands of the worst severe cases of chronic OCD all around the world in different language barriers, with translator calls in every time zone you can imagine. And I've never worked with one person. I worked with about 200 different people this year alone. And last year, did about 500, 600 one-to-ones and all the webinars. I've never met a single person who responded long-term with just a maybe, maybe not approach. Again, there's applicability, like I mentioned. Maybe it happened, maybe it didn't. But if it did, what's the worst case scenario? Maybe, maybe not doesn't have a level of unconditional self-life and other acceptance like we think it does. Just like exposures are not unconditional self-life, other acceptance. A lot of people think exposures are. So, to kind of sum up the video, there's some applicability. You can kind of distance yourself from that intrusiveness, especially in the thought perspective. But overall, it will usually not be deep enough to get underneath like it wasn't for me. Maybe, maybe not was not going to work with chronic sensory motor OCD, where I was completely latched 24/7, hyper-aware of my saliva and swallowing. 24/7, all day, every day, all I thought about, every meeting, every time at the gym, and everything like that. Again, can have some applicability, but overall, it's usually a lot more philosophical depth that's needed. You don't have to be turned into a Buddhist monk or a Stoic philosopher like Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, but we usually need a little bit more depth than that. So thank you so much for watching this video. I think it is really important to cover this topic because it is kind of watered down a lot. And if you enjoyed this and want to see more videos on this particularly, just let me know. And again, if you're interested in our coaching and webinar services, please email us at info@ocdrecovery.com. We'll get back to you in a timely fashion. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great day.